certainly have fears that there is a serial killer at loose in Perth.
Sarah Spiers, Jane Rimmer, Ciara Glennon.
And every time you saw a young girl walking by, you think, oh God, is she going to be the next victim?
Now, one man stands accused.
If police are right and Edwards is the Claremont serial killer, he's been hiding in plain sight for 20 years.
Hello, Natalie Bonjolo with you, and welcome to this bonus episode of Claremont in Conversation. It's Monday, 2nd of March, and a public holiday here in Western Australia, so court isn't sitting, but we are. Now, many of you are interested in the court process and how journalists operate, so we're taking this opportunity to have a short chat to our very own Tim Clarke and Alison Fan. Between you, you have decades of court experience. We're not going to say how many years, it's a lot. What is the question you get asked most about your jobs?
This trial, it's how do you keep up with all the DNA evidence, get your head around all the letters and numbers. But generally, people want to know about the gory stuff and how you stomach it, because you do see a lot of things that no sort of real other sort of workaday person that doesn't do this job would see, crime scene pictures and certainly hear a lot of things that your normal member of the public who's not a court watcher or in the police or one of those emergency services might hear. And it's a good question, actually. You build up a sort of immunity to it over the years, I suppose, Ali, and learn to deal with it in your own way.
Well, you're telling a story, I think, and what you're assessing it as is not looking at some of the gore, but you're assessing what it means as far as the story goes. Now, obviously, Tim with print is going into a lot more detail than a television reporter who maybe has only got a minute to tell the story. So we bang it right, boom, 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 straight up in a minute. We can only just really touch the surface of it. But really, as much as you would put in to someone coming home and the dinner table saying, hey, what happened today? And you'd tell them in 30 seconds what happened today. And I find that what most mums and dads want is something that they can digest easily over their dinner. So that's the difference between a TV reporter. But this particular trial has drawn an extraordinary amount of interest, so much so that just yesterday my physio from my gym, who's sort of watching my hips grow bigger by the day because I'm just sitting all day, she came in because she had an interest in somebody who was involved in the case. So this particular case, this is not like other murder trials, which usually only involve family of the victim, family of the perpetrator, and maybe a few others. This has got such an extraordinary spread of interest.
Ali's point there about you're obviously doing it for an audience. I always think of myself as the eyes of the, for people who can't get to court, don't know how to get to court, don't really want to get to court. It's always important to be, the viewer for them, but you also have to break it down into understandable language, obviously, and palatable language. And particularly for Ali, I mean, there are very strict rules about what you're allowed to broadcast in terms of those sort of nastier elements to murders. But even in print, I mean, you can go a bit further, but you use your words to try and tell the story without really shocking people. Unless it really is a shocking case, and this is one of them. I've done quite a few in Perth and my old life back in the UK. And sometimes when it really is a shocking case, you can't blunt it or dilute it too much, because that wouldn't be doing justice to the case, to the victims of the case, to the families of the victims in the case. And also you've got a responsibility by law to do a fair and accurate report, contemporaneous report of what you're hearing. So if you dilute it too much, then you might get in trouble yourself, because you're not actually representing exactly what was said in court. So it's a balancing act, I suppose, between not wanting to disgust people or shock people, even though some of the material you have to sort of communicate is disgusting and shocking, but also doing justice to the justice system and getting over what was said in court as accurately as you can.
When you leave court that day and you go home, do you leave it behind, some of those really gory aspects?
Yes, I do. Although some of the things I'm watching on Netflix are probably 50 times worse, but it's a completely different scene. And talking back to the newspapers, get away with a lot more than we can on television, because we've always been governed, right, that this is a children's hour, they're still up, anything before 7:30, and we are far more self-regulatory as far as horrific details go than the papers. And we have to, and to the point of sometimes we do sanitise stories, and it does distort them when we can't use some of the more, I guess, intimate details and describe how bad that rape was. We can say it's a horrific rape, but when you get down to the nitty-gritty, we are actually sanitising it.
Well, even in this case, the actual physical acts we haven't gone into too much, because sometimes you don't want to for various reasons, but mostly for particularly the living witnesses in this case. We know they're aware of what we're doing because they see us in court every day when they're there. So, as I say, there's a lot of things you have to weigh up. When you are reporting on all these type of cases, but particularly this case, to try and get the balance right between information and sensitivity, and just being a good human as well. I mean, you don't want to overly distress anyone when there's no need to tell the story. Yeah. And your question about leaving it at home or leaving it out of home, now I certainly consciously try to, even though my wife is for the last 4 months is plugging me for information. I've got younger children than Ali, and I don't particularly want to bring that before them. They know what I do. They know roughly the type of things I write about. But I wouldn't really want to have those details in any shape or form over the dinner table. Literally, that's when we usually have our conversations as a family, because I just don't. It doesn't help me. I don't think it'll help them. They have a rough idea of what I do, but they don't need to go into the nitty gritty. So I try and consciously leave it behind. But there are some cases and some nights that it's just impossible, and you do take it home with you and you do feel it, and that's when it's important to have good family that you can talk to, and friends that you can sometimes have a beer with or a chat with, and just say, oh yeah, it's just been a shocking week and this has happened and that has happened. Once again, not really going to the nitty gritty, but just be able to vent a bit. And also the people that you sit with in court. We're lucky enough at the West to have 2 other full-time court reporters. Not many other newspapers in the country would have those, apart from the real big ones. And then, we were jokingly talking about the opposition, particularly in the last 3-4 months. We've all sat together in court and in the media room, and you naturally get close because you're doing the same thing and you're doing the same job for slightly different people. So you share amongst yourselves as well, which is one of the things I've learned most over the journey, is that they're your rivals in inverted commas, but they're also doing exactly the same thing.
Quite a different case, this one, though, isn't it? Because it's so technical, so scientific. So much paperwork.
Yes.
Yeah, you literally do. I mean, you've got maybe the media image of the media, like Spotlight, or that breakfast news rivalry or something like that. In a case like this, when you're all spending so much time together, it's exactly the opposite, to be honest. Yeah. You're swapping notes, you're swapping ideas. I mean, if you've got a really good line that you think you've got to yourself, your professional sort of rivalries do kick in a little bit, but on the whole, you're checking with each other. Did I hear that right? Did you get that note? Did you get that quote? And the tally's the same, doing slightly different roles, but you're all listening to the same material. So,
well, you're sharing a very extraordinary and unique experience together.
Yeah.
And so you have to develop within that this camaraderie, because you need to lean on one another and support one another through this process.
I think so. I'd like to hope so anyway. A lot of the journos are, you know them anyway. You work together on different stories, and then court is a little niche within that, and you know each other. You're absolutely right, Nat. I mean, I doubt any of us will go sit through every day of a 6-month trial again, particularly not on this scale of interest, because the way the media works is you very, very rarely have an editor that will give you the time to cover a story every day of this length.
But I think we're the only two, as far as the Western Seven, that's religiously following it every day with a designated reporter.
Well, Em Moulton
is
doing the live blogging for us.
Yeah.
There's another live blogger on another
the
website.
ABC have three
the
there.
ABC have had 3 reporters
but the others
there every
come
day.
in and out.
And then, Ali's right. But
well, they've actually 7 have chosen. Well, as I said, I'm just doing it. That's all I'm doing, and when it finishes, I finish.
You never
it might
finish,
finish you
Alison.
off, Ali.
That was going, yes.
You'll be reporting forever.
I did run up the stairs today as a bit of exercise.
People often want to know how you go approaching key players within the courtroom for interviews and the competitiveness that sometimes surrounds that when there is a key player, and how long it might take you to establish the relationship, and how do you establish the relationship to get it to that point where that person will sit down and do an interview with you for the paper or for the television.
I think it's a respect and a familiarity with the person. Like anything, as I said, whether you're getting a plumber or an electrician, you get someone who might recommend or know the name. That's the same with the reporter. They know your name, they've seen you cover something, that you tend to get one story that follows on through another one. Sometimes that connection lasts for decades. And it's quite interesting, as I said, just approaching whether you get a tradie or whatever. It's someone who's been referred on, or you know the name if you heard the name. That's as far as getting an interview goes with somebody. I mean, a gunman who was on the loose rang me and came in, and it turns out he picked me because I'd done a story about a fire break 10 years earlier, and that was it. He just remembered a name. So that's really all it is, a familiarity and hopefully respect that they'll do something that the right thing by them.
Yeah, this case is out of the box, but generally speaking, I find the way you approach people, that really first impressions do last sometimes, particularly with families of victims or accused sometimes. I've always found that if you go just barreling in with your notebook flying around and pen and it doesn't really get you far. It might get you a curt yes or no, but it won't get you. But I've always found if you approach someone a little bit more gently, maybe not even have your notebook or your phone or your recorder visible. Just introduce yourself as as a person in the court. I'm here to cover it. It's going to be in the paper or on the TV or on the radio or whatever. And if you want to have your say, or if you feel like you need to say something, then here's my card. Give me a ring. As I say, sometimes, as I've said before, you are approaching a person, and a complete stranger, or you're a stranger to them at least, on the worst day of their lives. On the worst day of their lives, if they've seen someone they've loved has died, whether it be in an accident or through foul play or whatever, that is the worst day of their lives. And conversely, if you've just seen someone close to you convicted of a serious crime, that is also a very, very traumatic experience. Then most people aren't used to courts, not used to lawyers, judges, and certainly not media approaching them. And what you'll find, particularly in cases involving road deaths and things, they're just absolutely normal people, just like your neighbour or your auntie or whoever, and they are thrust into this system that they trust people to get them through it, and sometimes they feel a little bit very anxious. But Ali's right. If you approach someone in the right way and you do the right by them, then those connections last a lot longer. I've got a lot of people in my phone who email me about now and again that you've written about, or you've written a family member about, sometimes in horrific circumstances, who remember that you treated them nicely, that you wrote a story that they at least respected was fair and accurate, and they sometimes just contact you out of the blue to say, how are you going, or I'm doing this or I'm doing that, and so it can lead to, I wouldn't say friendships, but certainly connections with people that you wouldn't ordinarily make, and you'd hope you could keep sometimes because it helps them.
I think more often than not when people turn up to court, they're really unprepared for the media aspect. That comes as a surprise to them quite often. They don't expect it. They're not sure why you're there. They're thinking you shouldn't be there. And I think for court reporters, you're obviously reporting the facts, but sometimes the people don't like those facts that are being read out in court.
I don't think it's the reporters, I think it's the cameras that agitate people. Yep.
So how do you deal sometimes with that negative feedback that you might be getting? And I know, it's that thing, well, you are just doing your jobs.
Yeah, but you can say that till you're blue in the face, but it's still... you can tell it doesn't help. It makes the day or the week or the month or however long it was a more stressful environment. It comes with experience, but it also, as a reporter, any reporter, you get good at reading body language, you get good at reading cues, verbal cues, and visual cues from people, whether they're ready to be approached, they don't want to be approached at all. And sometimes you'll just go, no, that ain't going to work, and we'll just have to leave it, or maybe try again later, or even if it's just a, look, I know I get you don't want to talk now, here's my card, if you want to ring me, it's there, or would you mind if I took a number and I'll give you a call later if they're obviously visibly upset. And you're right, Nat, you get very negative people. It can get pretty full on sometimes outside court. And Ali's right, cameramen, because they are physically holding something, and actually you'll feel, why are you filming me?
Yes.
The reporter sometimes is just the peripheral vision, and it's the camera or the photographer that they focus on, because they're actually doing something, and there's colour and movement, and sometimes you do have to just get in the way or edge the cameraman out of the way a little bit, maybe, if you feel that there's going to be physical contact, because you never want physical contact. Well, as a print reporter, Ali used to work for Today Tonight. That was a bit of physical contact never went astray there.
The old biffos outside the court.
That's a different medium. Yeah. But look, I don't think you'd ever try and get into a fight with a family of a victim or something like
different
that.
circumstances,
Bad guys, fraudsters, all that.
Yeah.
If they want to kick off, well, that's up to them.
But you want to ask them the questions. You don't want them to slip down the street and run away and not be asked the questions.
Well, that's true, because particularly
You
television...
know that, Nat. You've chased a few down the streets around the place. Yeah.
Television is a much more visual medium, so you need the pictures to make the story, or certainly go with the story, whereas print, you as you say, you're working on your words a little bit more.
We don't chase victims down the...
That's
we chase politicians down and the baddies.
And bad politicians particularly get a real long chase. Then all the way down St George's Terrace and up the hill. And
at the end of the day, you're wanting an answer, and you're wanting an answer for the viewers and the readers.
Yeah, and sometimes, the victims as well, they'll get in touch with you pre-case and say, look, this guy's coming up for a trial, would you cover it? And, if you get to talk to him, ask him this or ask him that.
Yes.
Because sometimes particularly in... sex crime cases, sometimes victims do feel a little bit voiceless. They will get questioned, but the prosecutors will do their job, obviously. But you don't really get to ask the questions you'd like to ask. And sometimes they say to reporters, "Well, can you ask him this for me?" And sometimes you're very happy to oblige.
Yeah. After doing it this long, do you both still love it? Do you love sitting in court and hearing these cases?
I enjoy it because it's like I'm watching or reading a mystery that I just want to see what's going to happen in the next chapter of those involved, what they did. And so each day, when I think it's just going to perhaps bog down into more technical stuff, I'm surprised at what pops up. That's given us a story pretty well every night. Now, we've been covering it, we're going into week 13.
That's right.
And there's probably only been a handful of nights that I haven't filed when there's been bigger stories around. But I was surprised because I really thought we were only going to be filing for the first couple of weeks, and then it would completely die off. But now we're hearing all this contamination. It's just revived, and it's pretty bad for our path west. The contaminators. I mean, I know everybody's got problems with things, but this is an exact science, and it was a very high-profile case, and we're hearing stuff like that, like from last week, where it just kept coming and coming. So. Yeah,
and we will hear more of that when court resumes tomorrow. What's on the agenda tomorrow?
So Mr. Egan, Scott Egan, who's the reporting scientist in this case, will be back on the stand. His evidence in chief is still going, so he's got a bit to go there, and then he will be cross-examined. He was forewarned that will take at least a day. Mr. Jovich is going to spend. So I hope he's taking his vitamins, because I think he's going to have a few curly questions, and then we will take a break. By the sound of it, we're going to have a couple of days off while Mr. Jovich gets his head together in terms of fibres. But that wasn't his. Well, it sort of was. It was a collaborative thing, because Jonathan Whittaker, who we talked about quite often, FSS top man, LCN guru. He's on a flight to Perth next Saturday, we've been told. So he will land. And there's also another overseas witness, Susan Vintner, who is from another lab in New Zealand. So after Dr. Whittaker's finished all his stuff, which will be, he is the reporting scientist for the fingernails, so we'll actually get to see the analysis and see the comparisons and actually hear him, how he, when that popped up, and his call to Laurie Webb to tell everyone what they'd found. And then Susan Bintner will talk to the statistics around that find, where we've heard 80 to 100 million to 1 against that it's anyone else but Mr. Edwards. And then that will be the DNA portion of the trial done. And then we will go straight into fibres then. And that's what the 2 days off next week will be about, is Mr. Jovich getting all his ducks in a row for all his cross-examinations to come. So a shortened week next week, but I think it'll be a juicy one. I think Ali will be filing.
I'll have to put my jackets on again.
Yeah, I think Ali will be filing every day, as I will.
Well, we do have a very, very long way to go still. Thank you both so much, and thank you for really explaining to people exactly how you go about your day, and also just that bit of a personal insight into what it's like to do what you do and to take that home and to live with that. It's quite interesting, I think, for all of us. So we'll be back tomorrow for day 55 of Claremont in Conversation, and we hope to have your company then.
This podcast was produced by Kate Ryan and Alicia Preedy and recorded in the studios of 7 West Media. Audio files were provided from the archives of the 7 Network and the West Australian. Sign up for daily emails and all the latest on the Claremont trial at thewest.com.au.